A first ever stunning admission from a woman who accused Duke University lacrosse players of raping her nearly 20 years ago. The story was a national firestorm. She now says she lied about the encounter.
Rape charges dropped against a man wrongfully accused after he spent more than a month behind bars. Tonight, a 20-year-old Bucks County woman says she lied about the attack after police said her story didn't add up.
A drama in a California courtroom. A promising young football star who had been imprisoned for years on charges of kidnapping and rape was exonerated today. He won his freedom after he secretly recorded his accuser, a childhood friend, who admitted that she had lied.
This court grants defendant's motion.
Tonight, tears of relief, nearly 40 years in the making.
I'm really overwhelmed. Words can't describe it.
Anthony Broadwater exonerated by a New York State Supreme Court judge this week at 61 years old, after spending most of his life paying for a crime he didn't commit.
A promising college football player's life dreams shattered as he was falsely accused of rape. His accuser, 19-year-old Nikki Iovino, told police that she went to a party where two football players forced her to have sex in a bathroom. She later admitted that she had sex willingly and was afraid that if she admitted that, another student wouldn't want to date her.
Of all the fun topics out there that we could talk about today, let's talk about false allegations. And more specifically, let's talk about the dominant narrative that false allegations are rare. So rare, apparently, that they are practically non-existent. And us guys shouldn't worry about it.
All of the data that we have on the subject shows that true false allegations where the woman is straight up lying are incredibly rare. Because it's estimated that between 2% and 5% of accusations are truly false.
Now I'm going to help you out, little guy, because false accusations make up sometimes less than 2% of reports, meaning that a man is more likely to be essayed by another man than be falsely accused.
On top of all of this, the false accusation rates in sexual violence are about 2 to 8%, which is on par with every other major crime's false accusation rate.
When I say believe women, someone asks me, but what about the false accusations? And I get it, because this is what we've been taught to think about first. But here's what's actually true. False reports of sexual assault are estimated at 2 to 10%.
Like if somebody gave you 2 to 4% of a piece of cake, would you think that you got a lot of cake? Because more broadly, that's about the average of false allegations of rape that we see amongst total allegations of rape.
I'm hearing less than 1%, between 2 and 10%, between 2 and 8%, 5%, etc. What's all that based on? Well, ultimately, these are based on scientific studies like this one right here. This study came to the conclusion that the prevalence of false allegations is between 2 and 10%. This statistic has been shared countless times by women's rights groups, charities, and the mainstream media. And here's another one, a study done by the UK government called A Gap or a Chasm? Attrition in Reported Rape Cases. If you read through these types of studies, invariably you will come across a table that looks like this. These types of tables are populated with data that were collected by police departments, prosecutors' offices, and the courts. We've got the total number of police reports right here, about 2,300. And then all these numbers are the cases that the police dropped at some point and did not pursue, with the reasons listed here. So the police stopped pursuing because there was insufficient evidence, or the victim decided to withdraw from the case, or there's no evidence at all of any assault have taken place, etc. So we've got about 1,800 cases where the police dropped the case for one reason or another. That means that about 500 cases were sent to the prosecutor, right? So 2,300 minus 1,800 equals 500. And of those 500, another 150 were dropped by the prosecutor, and the rest went to trial. And of those that went to trial, we've got a total conviction rate of about 180. So when people say that, for example, the conviction rate for grapes is low, this is the type of data that they look at. Here it's 183 divided by 2,284. That's 8%. If you've heard different percentages, that's because they're quoting different studies. But the basic methodology across all these studies is essentially the same. All right, so what we're interested in are the false allegations. Turns out the police keeps track of those. According to this study, there were 216 in the period that they looked at, meaning a 9.5% rate of false allegations. 9.5% of all allegations are false, according to this official UK study. First of all, that's high. If you're saying that's low, you're insane. Second, what you need to realize is that the police only puts cases in this bucket of false allegations if they have sufficient evidence to conclude that the accuser knowingly and intentionally lied about the assault. That's a very restrictive standard. What about all the allegations that were false, but that the police were not able to prove were false? All those other categories here might very well contain false allegations. All the cases where the victims withdrew, or the prosecutor decided not to pursue, or the defendant was found not guilty. Some of those cases could very well have relied on lies and false allegations. I would even go so far to say that it is very possible that in some of these 77 cases here, where the prosecution secured a conviction, the allegation was in fact false. Instances of men going to prison while innocent do exist. Let's not forget that. So instead of reading this table as 216 cases were false allegations, it's probably more accurate to say at least 216 cases were false allegations. There's probably more, we just don't know for sure how many. That's not just a problem with this study. It's a problem with all the studies that exist out there and get quoted. Now, you'll say, hang on, that logic of yours cuts both ways. If it is true that some of the cases in all these buckets here are actually, in fact, false allegations and should have been labeled as such, then the opposite must be true also. Some of the cases that the police categorized as false allegations are not, in fact, false allegations and should be reassigned to a different category. To which I say, first off, you're right. I'm not one to trust the police very much. I'm sure they get things wrong all the time. Number two, however, the reason why other studies often arrive at very low false allegation rates, like 1%, 2%, 3%, it's because the raw police data, this is the raw data, tend to get adjusted downward because researchers look at the false allegations numbers and they decide that some of the false allegations, as recorded by police, are not, in fact, false allegations and should be removed from that category. I'm sure you'll agree that critically looking at the bucket of false allegations without doing the same for all the other categories is dishonest. In other words, we're critically looking at the false allegations cases, which only results in the removal of cases from that bucket and therefore leading to a lower false allegations number, but we're not looking critically at all the other buckets, which could have led to a higher false allegations number. Only making a downward adjustment without leaving any scope for an upward adjustment, because you're not even trying, seems to me unfair, incorrect, and ideologically motivated. All I'm trying to do with my observations is offer a counter-argument. So, what to do? We seem to agree that the police cannot always be trusted to get things right. But then, what to do with these numbers? Instead of second-guessing the police or making one-sided adjustments, is there something we can do to make sense of it all? Remember, the question is, how common are false allegations? I think the best thing we can do is compare like for like. What do we know for sure? We know that there are 216 allegations that the police feel confident are false. And we know there are 467 allegations that the police are confident are truthful, because those are the cases they sent to the prosecutor. Why 467? Because we start with 2,284 and 1,817 were dropped by police, meaning that 467 were sent to the prosecutor. Now, the police might get things wrong, but presumably they apply the same standard to all of those cases, so it is fair to group them together. That means that 216 plus 467, we have a total of 683 cases where the police felt they could make a determination as to the falsehood or the truthfulness of the allegation. That means that as far as the police could determine, 216 divided by 683, about 30% of allegations made to the police were false. That means that a reasonable estimate of the proportion of false allegations is 30% of all allegations. That sounds like a horrible exaggeration, but I'm strictly limiting myself to the data that's available in front of me. I'm not making anything up here. And actually, beyond the numbers, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that supports the 30%. Listen, for example, to these two lawyers talking about their experiences.
The Supreme Court of Canada said that women lie or fabricate sexual assault allegations is a rarity. That's not true. As many sexual assault cases we've been doing over the last 20 years, pretty high numbers. And this is not a joke.
It doesn't even matter if it's rare. What matters is every case is tried on its
merits.
But
it's not rare. Let's say 2 out of 10 cases, 20% or 30%, that's not rare. That's significant.
It's much higher than that. They keep agreeing that the number's a little bit higher, like maybe 8 or 10%. You know, the number keps going up.
It does, but
our experience is even higher than that. We won't get into it.
If you had an outbreak in your population of more than 2 or 3%, you'd call that significant. You might even call it an epidemic, when you get to 8, 9, 10, 20, or 30% of your population. We're dealing with a higher than 30% ratio of demonstrably provable false allegations. That's significant. Just step back. There's legitimate allegations. There's non-legitimate allegations. Let's objectively investigate. Let's objectively deal with these cases in the courts.
Yeah, I don't think it's 1% or 2% or any of these single-digit numbers that people quote all the time. I think we're in the double digits. I think it's a serious problem. I think it's a lot more prevalent than people realize. And if you take into account the enormous devastation that false allegations bring, we can only conclude that it is something that deserves a lot more attention. But for now, this is it for me. I hope you found this informative. Thanks for watching. Catch you later.